Ciao, my name is Alessandro, but you can call me 𝗬𝗓𝗘𝗏, and have you ever played any deduction games? Well, doesn't matter if you did or if you didn't, because today we're gonna be talking about the best deduction games I know. Now, there isn't much space in the board gaming like hobby to call yourself expert in something, because there is so much content everywhere, right? You'll never be up to date with all the games. But if there's one area that I think I have a good, decent knowledge in, is deduction games, because I really love deduction games. I don't think this looks good on camera. Now, let's start narrowing down what are deduction games. So there's a lot of confusion, I think, in what deduction games can actually be. It's not really confusion, but there's different type of deduction games that you can have. So when people think about deduction games, sometimes they think about social deduction games, you know, like Secret Hitler, Werewolf, which in Italy is called Lupus in Tabula, Fabula. I don't know why we need to use the intervention of Latin words, but doesn't matter, Italians just built different. Or for example, games like Avalon, The Resistance, those kind of games where there's a group of people that play like the good team, the other group of people that plays the bad team, and the bad team tries to kill the good team. These are not the kind of deduction games we'll be talking about today. Some other times when people think about deduction games, they think Sherlock Holmes? Investigative? That's so fitting, but it's not what we're gonna be talking about. We're not gonna be talking about exit games, unlock games, or Sherlock Holmes detective, what is consultant detective, something like that. All of these games that require you to investigate, like Chronicles of Crime, we're not gonna be talking about that. Today we're gonna be focusing on using our little brain, like here. I mean, you use your brain also in the other games, but in these kind of games, a little bit more, because we're gonna be talking about logical deduction kind of games. Those kind of games where you really need to use and put together a set of logical rules to actually deduct the location of something or who's the murderer. Now, the mother, most ancient of deduction games, I would say it is probably Clue. Because in that game you're basically trying to understand who's the murderer, in which location, and with which weapon around the house. And that's kind of like the easiest kind of deduction game, because you're just ruling out people, weapons, locations by someone else having those information, okay? So you're just trying to understand who has which information and trying to get to a solution. It is simple, but it is effective. So if you want to have an idea, that's an idea. But we're gonna be talking about some games that are a little bit more advanced than that. Before we dive into the first game, I want to remind you that if you like this kind of content, if you like board games, you can leave a like to this video, subscribe to my channel. I would be immensely grateful. And if you feel extremely generous and extremely supportive, I also have a Patreon Ko-fi link down below where you can tip me, subscribe to my Patreon, and so on. But thank you so much even just for watching, and now let's talk about the best deduction games. By the way, side note, we're not gonna be ranking them because each of them has something unique in them. So we're gonna be talking about what are the different aspects, what makes these games unique and different from all the other deduction games. And we're gonna be seeing, you can choose for yourself what's the best for you, right? What's most fitting for your group of people that you play with, or the type of person you are. So the first game we're gonna be talking about is the Search for Lost Species. The Search for Lost Species is one of the games of the series of the Search for whatever. So this series started with the Search for Planet X, which is the most popular game. It is actually probably the highest ranked deduction game, logical deduction game on Board Games Geek. Then the Search for Lost Species came out, I think, a couple of years ago, and now there's been released a new The Search For game, which is the Search for UAPs. So while I'm just talking about the Search for Lost Species, I also tried the Search for Planet X. I don't know anything about the Search for UAPs, and let's take this section of the video as a suggestion or how the Search for whatever games work, because they're pretty similar. At least Search for Planet X and Search for Lost Species are pretty similar. Why are we starting from this game? Because this is the most satisfying, purest logical deduction games of all the ones we'll be talking about. So the aim of this game is searching for the lost species, which is not the winning criteria, but we're gonna talk about that more later. So you're gonna have a map where each of the areas contains one and only one species, or is truly empty, which means it contains no species. And you know that there's a set of species that are already in every game. The 𝗨𝗨, the 𝗪𝗁, the python, and the toad. And these 4 species always have the same logical rules. In every single game, they don't change. But the lost species, you can adapt and change a different species every time. There's like 5 or 6 in the game. And each of these lost species will have a different logical rule applied to them. Your objective here would be to kinda try to find the lost species, because that will earn you a lot of points. And how you do that? By first looking for all the other species on the map, and then by applying all these logical rules and trying to find the lost species within the map. The first thing I want to mention, which is sometimes annoying for some players, is that this game is an app-driven game, and I would say also that it's best that every person at the table has their own device. So if you're not into app-driven games, let this go, like, don't watch this, skip to the next section. During each player's turn, the player is gonna be asking queries to the app. There are different types of actions. The least powerful actions are gonna cost you less time, while the most powerful actions are gonna cost you more time. And the time is very important in this game, because depending on how far behind you are on the time track, you're gonna be able to do your turn earlier or later. So there is a little bit of an action economy. Take less powerful action but more frequently, or take more powerful action but less frequently, while other players take more turns in between. It is very important to understand the logical rules and logical implications of some of the elements of the board. So the 𝗨𝗨s are always in a diamond shape kind of fashion on the map, so you know that the 𝗨𝗨s are always gonna be sitting together. Or for example, the toad is always close to at least 2 truly empty sectors. So if you find the toad, you know that at least 2 sectors adjacent to that toad are gonna be truly empty. The python is never adjacent to 𝗪𝗪. Why? Because in nature the pythons eat 𝗪𝗪. So that's why the python is never adjacent to 𝗪𝗪, because it already has eaten all the 𝗪𝗪 around it. How thematic. And if you don't know what 𝗪𝗪 is, it's this animal. I know, I didn't know this thing existed. Also, 𝗨𝗨s are kind of parrots. If you never heard about these animals, it's because this game is set in Indonesia and Papua New Guinea, and it is kind of environmentally conscious kind of game. So there's no plastic in this game, and all the paper is recycled, or at least the rulebook paper. So there are in the rulebook some notes about conservation of the lost species, and also about environmental awareness. So keep this in mind if you want to support this kind of idea behind the game. It's a good thing. It's a good thing they thought about these elements. But anyways, what's special about this game? Now, there are some elements about like moving on the board, and as I said, like turn economy, action economy, that are great. But what is really incredible about this game is this is the purest and most streamlined, most logical reasoning focus of the deduction games we're gonna be talking about. The game ends when someone finds the lost species, so you're slowly building up your map and your knowledge, clue by clue, logical rule by logical rule, and populating your map with all of these species. And it is just extremely satisfying for you to start connecting all the dots and all the information together to be able to finally reveal the lost species location. So if you're looking for a purely deduction game, this is great. This is the game for you, but you need to know that this game is not great for beginners. Now, I want to mention that there is a way to adjust the difficulty, because At the beginning of the game, you're gonna be given some clues by the app, and you can give beginners more clues or advanced players less clues, so that the starting point can be adjusted depending on the level of experience with deduction kind of games. But the deductions in this game can be a little bit tricky to understand if someone is not used to playing deduction games. So if you're thinking about buying your first deduction game, maybe this wouldn't be the first thing I would go for, unless you're really willing to put some effort into understanding how everything works. And I also want to mention it as a solo game, a solo implementation. You can play with 𝗫, which has two modes, easy or hard mode. I will say I played both of the 𝗫s on my channel. You can find the videos at the link showing right now at the top right corner if you want to watch the playthroughs. Also see how this game plays solo, but it's basically the same as playing non-solo. And I would say I found it a little bit easy, maybe. 𝗫 was a little bit slow in the deduction, even in the hard mode, but maybe I just got lucky with my information and being very fast. Also, I mentioned that in this game, the player with the most victory point wins, and I said that you score a lot of victory points by finding the lost species, but a big part of the game is also placing sightings on the board. And when you do these sightings, it's basically like betting on the fact that there is a species in a specified place on the board, and if you are correct, you're gonna score points depending on how rare is the species. The pythons, there's only one in the board, you're just gonna score 5 points. The lohris, there's 4 on the board and they're kind of easy to find, so you're gonna score 2 points. But if you're the first person to find one of the species on the board, you're just gonna score extra points for being the first one. So you really wanna place these sightings on the board to score points. Anyways, this is pretty much what you need to know about the search for lost species. Let me know if you ever tried it and what you think about it. But now let's go to the next game. Now, I mentioned how the previous game, the search for lost species, can be a little bit tricky for beginner players, right? Or it shouldn't be maybe your first deduction game. So what's a good first option for beginners, or what's a good option for an easier, shorter kind of game? Well, we have Cryptid. Cryptid is a competitive game, they're all competitive by the way, where you're gonna be trying to find the location of the monster, you see this cute monster here, on the board, and you're gonna be doing so by exchanging clues with your other players. So no app required for this game, and this might be something that is important to you. So at the beginning of the game, you're gonna be given some clues. Now, I said that there is no app required in this game because there isn't. Like, you can play with the cards included in the game box, and then you're gonna be getting clues from some leaflets depending on the card that you have drawn. But there is also my preferred way of playing it. There is a web browser app where you can just simply like get the clues, show the clues very easily, and you just need one phone for everybody. You're just gonna use the phone once at the beginning of the game, and then it's done. But if you really hate using your phone, there is the option to just use the cards. Now, how does Cryptid work? The great thing about Cryptid is that it's pretty simple. You only have 2 actions that you can do on your turn. You can question someone for a space or search in a space. Now, I told you that at the beginning of the game you're gonna be getting a clue, and you're gonna be getting a clue about where the monster can be. So, for example, I'm gonna get a clue being like, the monster is either in a desert or a swamp space. So you know that all the desert and swamp spaces on the board are gonna be possible locations for the monster, and all the other spaces are excluded. Now, if you're questioning someone for a clue, you're asking for them to provide you with the information about one specific space. And the question is always the same: can the monster, according to your clue, be in this place? So if they would ask me and I got the clue about desert and swamp, if they were pointing at a mountain location, I would say, no, it cannot be there. If it was a desert space, if it was a swamp space, then I would say, yes, it can be there according to my clue. This action allows you to be able to not give any extra information to other players. Why? Because if the answer is yes, you don't need to give any information to the other players. If the answer is no, you would have to give information to the other players. The information is selecting a spot on the map and placing a cube there to basically define that the monster cannot be there according to your rule. So you're giving out a little bit of information, but it's negative information, which is not very precious. The second type of action you can take is searching in a space. And this is a more powerful action because you're not just asking one player at the table, but you're gonna ask to all the players at the table, going in clockwise order or in player order, to tell you if the monster can be there according to their clues. The first player that says no stops the chain of questioning, but if all the players say yes, then you have found the location of the monster and you win the game. Now, what's the price to pay to do this action? You're gonna be placing one of your circle tokens on the map in the same space where you're searching, and this is gonna signal to everybody that according to your clue, the monster can be there. So this is a positive kind of information, which is more rare to find and more precious for the other players to actually understand what is the clue you've gotten from the app. So there is a balance between wanting to get more information, but also the kind of information you're gonna be giving out to other players. So this is kind of like very narrowed down to just being a very pure logical deduction game, similar to how 𝗏𝗁𝗍𝗔 is. 𝗏𝗁𝗍𝗔 is obviously more complex, it has a little bit more, but it's still like pure logical deduction. The first player to find the monster actually wins the game. Now, why is this game in this ranking, in this best deduction games kind of video? Because it's easy, it's simple, it's quick, it's a good entry point to deduction games, and there isn't too much fluff. I basically explained you the game right now in 3 minutes. It doesn't have deluxified production components, it's just cubes and circles on a map. So I'm sorry if you were looking for beautiful looking components. I mean, it still looks beautiful, but it's not like anything special, right? And the setup is pretty quick. Everything is pretty like smooth. I don't know what to tell you. Like usually we end up playing 2, 3, 4 rounds of the same game. Also, you can adjust the difficulty. There is an advanced mode. I almost never played the advanced mode, where basically you can get also negative clues from where the monster is. So while in the regular game you can only get clues like the monster is in desert or mountain, in the advanced mode you can get also clues like the monster is not on desert or mountain. This is gonna make the deductions or the clue space, because there's a certain amount of clues that you can get, much wider, and it's gonna make it much harder for you when try to guess the location of the monster. But you can play that because it's just a step up on difficulty, and again, it's the same game, so you don't have too much overhead. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a solo mode. This is one of the few games in this list that actually doesn't have a solo mode, and it can be played between 3 and 5 players, so keep that in mind, but good entry point for a deduction player. And let me know if you've ever tried Cryptid and what you think about it, because I love it. I genuinely love it, so I hope you do too. Now we're gonna be stepping up the game a little bit with a game that adds so much more than just deduction to a logical deduction game. And this game is going to be Alchemists. In this game you're gonna be combining logical deduction with worker placement, with a lot of other stuff, to be honest, but mostly logical deduction and worker placement. Just want to start by saying that this is probably the most complex of the games we're gonna be talking about today, kind of tied with 𝗏𝗁𝗍𝗔, but it adds all of these mechanics to it that make it a little bit more complex. Also, this one is an app-driven game. There is the possibility to not use the app, but then one of the players will have to be the game master, which I don't advise. Why would you prevent someone from playing the game just because you don't want to use an app? Don't do that. And this is how it works. At the beginning of each round, each player will have to place workers on the board and select already all the actions they want to be taking during that round. There aren't that many rounds in the game, so you really want to be efficient with it. And sometimes taking actions first is gonna be helpful for you to get more information or get the tool you need or get the amount of money you need or yada yada yada, you know? So not only is important where you're placing your workers, but also the priority you have on the turn order, because at the beginning of each round you're also gonna be selecting your priority. If you select a lower priority, you're gonna get more resources. If you're gonna select a higher priority, you're gonna get less resources. So there is this kind of balance that you really have to math out. But what is the deduction aspect of this game? You're gonna be mixing up ingredients to create potions. 2 ingredients mixed together always give you a potion, and each ingredient is defined by 3 aspects. blue, green and red, and each of these three aspects can be positive or negative, and each of these three aspects can be big or small. I know, confusing, but when you mix up two ingredients, you're gonna get one of the potions, and that depends on what are the aspects on these two ingredients. So if one of the ingredients has a positive green big aspect and the other one has a positive green small aspect, then they will create a positive green potion. And this is basically how the game works. You're gonna be mixing up ingredients and see which kind of potion you get. You're gonna be testing on students, and if you create a negative potion, you will have to pay them with coins, or you're gonna be testing on yourself, but if you create a negative potion and you test it on yourself, your next turn will be a little bit less efficient. So if you know that two ingredients create a positive green potion, you know that both of them have the positive green aspect, and this is how the deduction will keep flowing. Mixing more and more ingredients to create potions will give you a clearer idea of which are the aspects linked to each of the ingredients. When you're ready to guess what are these aspects on each ingredient, you're gonna be taking a specific action where you're actually gonna be able to guess that and place some guesses on the board. And at the end of the game, if these guesses were correct, you're gonna be getting points. If these guesses are wrong, you're gonna be removing points. But also there are some tokens that you can place on the board that are kind of doubtful. So sometimes the game will force you to make guesses in advance. Even if you don't have enough information, it will tell you, make a guess or you're gonna be losing points. So sometimes you wanna place these kind of doubtful tokens on the board, being like, I'm not sure about this, and since I'm not sure, if this is correct, I'm not gonna be scoring any points, but if this is wrong, I'm not gonna be losing points. The advantage there is just like, I placed a guess, I'm not sure about this color aspect, so if that is wrong, I don't lose any points. So I hope you can start understanding that in this game, the deduction is not as clean, as neat as it was in the previous games. There is a little bit of luck guessing here, because by the end of the game, you don't have enough rounds to get all the information about all the potions. You're not gonna be certain about the guesses you're gonna be making most of the times. You're gonna be sometimes guessing a little and risking it a little, according also to what the other players have guessed and relying on their ability to actually make good guesses. Even though, as I said, the game forces you to make guesses sometimes, so sometimes they're just gambling themselves, and it can lead to a chain of like misunderstandings and miscomprehension. So this is one of these games that it has deduction, but it's not the kind of satisfying deduction. At least when I play it, I'm not fully satisfied with the amount of time I had to deduct the ingredients and to score points for them. Sometimes I just had to guess it because I had to place a deduction somewhere, otherwise I wouldn't score any points. And at the end of the game, the player with the most points obviously wins. Not only, but there is a little bit of resource management, because there is coins, money in this game, and the money are important to be testing on students, but also buying some artifacts that are gonna give you some good advantages. So worker placement, resource management and deduction all together. So if you want a more complete board gaming experience that is still very relying on deduction, but it introduces much more, and you don't want that kind of satisfying feeling of being like, I got it all figured out, this is the game for you. One thing I will say is that since sometimes you're gonna be guessing, placing guesses of some of the ingredients combinations aspects, the game rewards you for actually finding the right aspects of something that was incorrectly guessed before. You actually have the possibility of debunking other players' theory, which is actually one of the best way to score points. It's gonna score you a lot of points. You can actually debunk some other theories. So I like that aspect. I like that even though the game forces you to guess, it gives you also a rewarding way for you to like throw away those wrong guesses and place your correct guess there. Have you tried Alchemists? What do you think? Are you usually satisfied with your level of deduction in the game? And do you actually get to deduct everything throughout the number of rounds that are allowed to you? Because never happened to me, but maybe I'm a bad deductor. We have talked about a very complete deduction game, The Search for Lost Species, very focused on deduction, very satisfying, a little bit complex. So we also talked about more beginner-friendly kind of deduction game, Cryptid, and we played about a game that introduces other mechanics like worker placement and resource management. Now, what are we gonna be talking about? Well, a game that forces you to switch your mindset, and this game is going to be Turing Machine. In Turing Machine, you're gonna be trying to guess a 3-digit code with each of the digits ranging from 1 to 5. How you do that? By asking questions to the machine. The first player to guess the correct code wins the game. And how do you ask these questions? Well, during each of the rounds, you're gonna be placing a guess of the code that you think might be the correct one. At the beginning, obviously, it's gonna be completely random, but sometimes you don't even want to achieve the correct code. You just want the code to satisfy some criteria, because you're gonna be testing this code, this specific code, for some of the criteria on the board. Now, what's different about this game? The problem is that in this case, you're not gonna be asking questions, but the machine is gonna be answering with yes or no. So what's the problem here? Trying to understand what is the question that is being answered. Because you know the answer to the question. But what is the question that I'm asking? And that is truly a mental switch in this game. Now, I will explain you with an example how it works. So if you have a criteria card that tells you, testing this criteria will tell you which of the 3 digits is gonna be the biggest. Is it gonna be the square, the triangle, or the circle? Which are respectively corresponding to the first, second, and third digit. Now I'm testing the code 145. Okay, I'm testing 145 against this criteria and I get a negative response. I gotta know, what's the question in this case? I wanted to know which was the biggest number in the sequence. So why am I telling me, no, you should tell me triangle, square, or circle? That's not how this game works. You basically have to think that in your sequence, you have a 1, 4, 5, right? So what is the biggest number in your sequence? The 5, okay? So what you're actually asking the machine is the third digit, is the circle digit the biggest in the sequence? And the machine is telling you, no, it's not. So you know that the biggest number in the sequence is either the triangle or the square. Keep in mind, you have no information whatsoever about what is the digit. You don't know that the digit is a 5. You don't know if the digit is a 4, or if the triangle and a square are actually 1 or 4, or the circle can be a 5. You don't have any of this kind of information. It is just giving you a logical rule, and then you have to put together all the logical rules to get to the answer of the code. Now, this is just to try and make you understand how this game works. I took a very easy example. There are much more complex examples, because this game has so many difficulty modes. You can play with different amount of criteria cards, so different amount of criteria that you need to figure out, because each criteria is necessary for you to get the right code. But also you can play with criteria that are not mutually exclusive and can make the deduction much more complex. But also you can play in hard or extreme mode, and those modes are, I never tried them, but they're nuts. Because basically you don't know, for example, which criteria you're testing against, or which is the correct answer between 2 of the criteria card that you're testing. So it just gives you a lot of complexity added. And this is one of my main problems with this game, which I love, by the way. But one of the things I find is that whenever you want to step up the difficulty a little, you're not stepping up the difficulty a little. You're stepping up the complexity by a lot. A lot. It's basically a completely new, different way of thinking and approaching the game. And this is what's unique about this game. This game forces you to switch your mindset about what are the answers that the game is giving you. Which question is the game answering to? And this can be a little bit complicated at first. It can be a little bit difficult to understand, especially for new players. I think that this game is also super quick and kind of beginner friendly, but these beginners really need to get into the right mindset, and that's gonna take a while. It might take 20 minutes of repeating the same example over and over and over again for them to actually understand how it works, because it is difficult. If you don't understand, if you've never played it, it's hard. Even if you played other deduction games, this is a complete switch, okay? This is a complete new way of approaching deduction. So keep that in mind. Now, another thing I want to say is that usually all the players at the table get to the solution at the same time, or almost, okay? So you really need to be efficient with the amount of questions you're asking, because in that case, that's the tiebreaker. The least amount of questions you ask, the better you're gonna be, okay? The more chances you're gonna have at winning if someone gets the answer at the same time as you, because everybody can guess at the end of a round what is their guess. You only have one guess, one final guess, so once you place your final guess, you're out of the game if it's wrong, but if it's correct and more people have it correct, you're gonna have to go to the tiebreaker. So as I said, in pretty basic modes, kind of everybody gets to the solution almost at the same time, and I'm not sure I totally like that. That's why I would say this is more of a solo-oriented kind of game. Also, there are challenges that you can do every single day using a web browser app. So I want to mention also that this game theoretically doesn't require an app. There are some configuration that you can play in the back of the rulebook, but use the app because the app will give you millions and millions and millions of different games, while the back of the rulebook is just gonna give you like maximum 20 games, and they're gonna be always the same. So you kinda need to use the app in this game, okay? You just gotta deal with it, you know? Also, let's talk about the punch card mechanism, because that's super unique and super fun, how you align punch cards to actually get answers. I am always being fascinated about how these deduction games actually are built and compiled together. I have no idea whatsoever, but to me this game is the most fascinating of them all, because it seems like a true masterwork with all the logical deduction. Of course, there's an algorithm that creates all these beautiful cards and punch cards to align together and puts together these criteria. I just don't understand how that actually happens. Again, this game is absolutely unique. I don't think I will ever get rid of it. I just don't find myself playing as much as I thought I would. Also because I don't usually play solo that often unless it's on the channel. Speaking of which, I have playthroughs on my channel about this game, so you can find them at the link showing right now in the top right corner. And I have to say, this was the first video ever released on my channel. This is how much I wanted to play this game solo and how much I actually think this game is incredible. Obviously, it's like both of the videos are pretty old. I was doing videos kind of a live stream talking, so don't expect a great quality of lights or whatever, but I promise we're gonna be doing more playthroughs of Turing Machine because I absolutely love this game. Let me know what you think about it, if you ever tried, if it attracts you or you just think it's too weird, you know, too weird. Sometimes you don't want to deal with weirdos, and this game for sure is one of the weirdos. Before going into the last game for this video, I want to remind you that if you like this kind of content, if you like board games and deduction, you can leave a like to this video, subscribe to my channel. I have a lot of playthroughs. I mostly do playthroughs also, so if you enjoy watching those, just check out my playlist section. You're probably gonna find something you like, and thank you so much for watching again. Now on to the last game for today. Last but not least, the game that I've been obsessed for the past couple of months since I got it, we're gonna be talking about Black Sonata. Black Sonata is a solo-only deduction game where you're gonna be chasing the Dark Lady down through the streets of London. And the Dark Lady is basically the lady in Shakespeare's sonnets. That's why you see Shakespeare's face here on the box. And this game combines both deduction with hidden movement. And hidden movement also includes some sort of deduction. So there's a double layer of deduction in this game. So what you're gonna be doing in this game is moving through London, trying to catch the Dark Lady. You're gonna have a deck of cards that is gonna tell you where the Dark Lady is moving, but it's not gonna tell you exactly the location where the Dark Lady is moving. That would be too easy. It's gonna give you a symbol linked to the location where the Dark Lady is moving, and obviously the symbols are repeated on the board, so you are never really sure, almost never really sure, where the Dark Lady will be, and you will be trying to understand where she's actually moving, and you're gonna be trying to be in the same location for her and search for the Dark Lady. If the Dark Lady is actually in that location, then you're gonna be able to get some clues that are gonna help you deduct who the Dark Lady is. How do you actually deduct who the Dark Lady is? Because you're trying to find their identity. Well, each of the Dark Ladies is gonna be identified by 3 aspects, and these 3 aspects are among the 7 possible aspects in the game, and each of the clues you're gonna be getting is gonna give you 3 aspects and is gonna be telling you how many of these aspects are actually gonna be found on your Dark Lady card. Getting enough of these clues, you're gonna be finding all the 3 aspects that actually relate to your Dark Lady and be able to confront her and accuse her of being who she is. If you're correct, you win the game. If you're not, you lose. The Dark Lady has fled and eluded all your deductions. Now, this game is so quick, like it's another one of these scripted Turing Machine kind of games. You play it in like 20 minutes, maximum 30 minutes, and it's like so crunchy with the deduction. Now, one thing I want to mention is that the base game is kind of limited, okay? You just have the game itself, but at some point it's always gonna be kind of the same game. If you really want to step up the game you need to get one of the expansions. There are 2 expansions released, the Fair Youth and the Strange Shadows. The Strange Shadows is the one I have and is the latest one that came out. I got it a couple of months ago from a pledge. This was my first ever backed game, so even though it was kind of a reprint with an extra expansion, you know? So I don't know if that actually counts. And each expansion adds like 5 to 6 modules that you can add in a modular way. So you can add all of them, none of them, some of them to your actual gameplay to make it a little bit easier, a little bit more challenging. There are obviously like some modules that help you get the Dark Lady, or there are some modules that make the Dark Lady much harder to guess. Or they even change completely how the Dark Lady works, for example the Darkest Ladies. So there is a lot of content to this game. I'm so glad these expansions came to life because the base game can get a little bit boring if you play it a lot. And for example, there can be modules that add even another layer of deduction. For example, the Blazonry or the Fair Youth, they're gonna add a 3rd layer of deduction on top of all these deduction layers. So it is really a deduction in the deduction, meta deduction, you know. It's amazing. Now, as I said, this is unfortunately a solo-only game. In the Strange Shadows expansion, there is a module called the Cat and Mouse to be able to play in 2 players. I have tried it once. I'm not convinced about it. It's meant to be a solo game, so this one might not have worked very well for 2 players, but at the same time, I have to try it more. Maybe it's enjoyable. If you want to know more about Black Sonata, how it plays, watch me play with all the Strange Shadows modules and so on, you're gonna find the list of all my playthroughs at the link showing right now at the top right corner of the screen. I have made already 3 playthroughs where I explain all the new modules and I also explain how to play in the first one, and we're gonna be having a live playing Black Sonata together next Wednesday, 16th of April at 8:30 European time on YouTube here. You're gonna be finding the link to that live showing right now at the top right corner of the screen again, and if you want you can click on that and click notify me for whenever we go live. I'd immensely appreciate if some of you would join me for this solo together playthrough of Black Sonata. Have you tried Black Sonata? Do you own it? Do you want to own it? Because I wanted to own it for a long time, but it was hard to get it because it was never reprinted, but I think now we're fine. I think now it's in stock in a lot of places because they reprinted it. Now on to our final thoughts for this video. We have been talking about 5 amazing deduction board games. We have been talking about the Lost Species, which has a solo mode, and it is great for how crunchy the deductions are and how many logical rules you can intertwine together to actually get to the Lost Species location. We have talked about Cryptid, which is a more beginner-friendly kind of game, which is also still purely deduction-oriented. We have talked about Alchemists, which doesn't provide a solo option just like Cryptid, but includes worker placement and resource management. We have talked about the weird one, you know? Turing Machine with all the punch cards and the mentality switch to actually understand what the game is trying to give you as a hint, as a clue. And then we have talked about a solo-only experience with Black Sonata that not only includes a double layer of deduction, but also some hidden movement. I hope you enjoyed this selection of deduction games. I hope you're a deduction fan just like me. And if you have any suggestions about other deduction games, let me know. For example, I am curious about Paint the Roses at the moment, so I'd like to maybe think about the game, if I want to watch some playthroughs. I have to say I tried some other deduction games in my life, obviously. Like, one of the ones that I didn't really like too much is Awkward Guests, because it felt like at some point the clues were getting very repetitive and very stale. You were not able to progress anymore, and at the end of the game I just had to basically guess who was the murderer and all the combinations of stuff that you need to guess in that game. I got it, but it was kind of a lucky guess because I really was in a spot where I was stuck with getting the same clues over and over again. So let me know your suggestions for more deduction games. Let me know deduction games you didn't actually enjoy, so I might stay away from these. And let me know your opinions on all the deduction games we've talked about. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're gonna enjoy hanging out with me in the future. I really hope you do so. For the moment, I just say ciao ciao!